As a leader in the grief space, I've cared for and supported families and communities for over 20 years. This show dives into the journey and experiences all of us will most certainly encounter in life. Welcome to the Guiding Grief podcast, where we discuss grief and explore opportunities for growth and connection. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach, and this is Guiding Grief on KJT TV. Welcome back to the Guiding Grief podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach. We are privileged today to be sitting with Jennifer Sarmento, and we are going to discuss the Kyle Taylor Foundation and learn about her journey in celebrating her son's life and looking out for your children in our community and in all communities, hopefully in the future. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here and talking about something that I know is near and dear to your heart every single waking moment of your life, even when you're sleeping.
Yes.
And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'd like for you to lead off and just share what Kyle's Foundation is, and then we'll break down and get into the factors of the origin in addition to things that are associated with the heart.
Okay. So the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation was started in 2018 after my son Kyle passed away at the age of 18 from sudden cardiac arrest. He was an active college student at the time, had no known heart-related issue, and in February, he was over at a friend's house in Santa Cruz playing some video games and was found collapsed in another room of his friend's house and was rushed to a hospital. And I got the call that night that Kyle had gone into the hospital. Didn't know it was cardiac arrest at the time, but got the call and went into the hospital. And that's when I first heard sudden cardiac arrest. And I had no idea that something like that could happen to somebody seemingly healthy, young, active, young man. And so when we started kind of Googling the, sudden cardiac arrest in youth or, type things, and all these things started popping up. And I realized there was so much information out there that I didn't know, and that I needed to share that with other people, and that there were ways to help prevent sudden cardiac arrest in youth. And so that's how we started the foundation. So it really started by myself, my husband, and my daughter, Allison. And so we focus on bringing awareness to sudden cardiac arrest in youth. And we do that by providing heart screenings into the community. So we bring in EKG machines and medical volunteers and stuff to do heart screenings. We donate AEDs out into the community, and we also do CPR and AED training. So that's kind of really the three main pillars that we focus on.
I remember in our initial conversation, we were talking about some things that might have been signs. Had you known then as it related to Kyle fainting at a younger age, and you would have known to look into something.
Right.
And it was hydration that they told you.
Yeah. So about a couple years before Kyle had his cardiac arrest, he'd come home from soccer practice from his high school team and was standing in our living room and just said, "Mom, I don't feel good." And before he could finish that sentence, he was on the floor. And so we rushed him to the hospital, and they told us, they filled him with IVs and said he's just dehydrated. Follow up with your pediatrician. And we did that. And the pediatrician said, yeah, he's good to go. And he was back on a soccer field and never had anything else again. So we just assumed, that must be what it was. Right. And so it wasn't until he had his cardiac arrest and I was standing there talking to the ICU doctor, and I happened to mention that he had that, and come to find out that's actually one of the top most common symptoms or signs that there's a heart-related issue is fainting. So
it's just so wild that what you mentioned, Kyle was healthy, right? There wasn't any other signs out there that there might be something wrong with him. And then you referred to the two things as it relates to cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac arrest, that it is electrical or structural.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So usually in youth, it's usually a structural issue. Like Kyle, we found out that his heart muscle was enlarged. Or there's electrical issues, like your electrical pathway of your heart has an issue. And so those are missed because the basic physicals that our children get, our annual physicals that they get every year, miss that because it can't be heard through a stethoscope. It has to be seen on an EKG or an echocardiogram. And so, 23,000 youth every year in our country are affected by cardiac arrest, and most of those don't survive because they don't have this test done. And so that's why
not a small number.
No, that's not a small number. I know when I tell people that, they're shocked. 1 in 300 youth have an undiagnosed heart condition that puts them at risk for cardiac arrest. I can go on and on with the statistics, but 23,000 youth, that's a lot of kids in our country, and with a survival rate of only 10%. Most of those kids do not survive. So that's why we bring on the EKGs, because it can find about 85% of the issues that can cause cardiac arrest in kids.
And then if not the EKG, then there's the next step that you would provide.
Yeah. So we also can do an echo, which is like an ultrasound of the heart. And so we have cardiosonographer volunteers that come in and will provide that echo. If we have on-site doctors that come volunteer, and if they deem that they need that, they'll send them to do that additional test. Yeah.
I just, I wish I didn't know you in this capacity.
Right, I know.
But what I do love is that Kyle is forever present, and he and his name is helping so many other children.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that it was day one.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was. We were still in the hospital, and when it happened so suddenly, I mean, he was raiding my refrigerator earlier that day, and then next thing I know, I'm in an ICU room with him with machines attached to him and everything. And then 2 days later, told that he wasn't gonna survive. I remember telling my husband and my daughter, "This isn't the end of Kyle." I don't know what that means at the time. Right. I knew that I was going to do something, because for me as his mom, his life ending in that hospital bed just short of his 19th birthday, I couldn't fathom that. And so I needed to have his life continue. It's just doing it in a different way, right? His spirit is here. The work that we do with the foundation, that represents Kyle and his life. So
yeah, keeping that memory alive by making sure that other children don't have to experience this. I want to talk about what those screenings look like, because we first got an opportunity to meet at Los Gatos Rotary, the afternoon Rotary Club that I've been a part of for many years, and support this organization, and just want to talk about how you go out in the community and continue to garner support, and then you have to increase bandwidth, right? You still have a full-time job.
Yes.
You're also doing a second full-time job, which is honoring Kyle and taking care of other people's kids for this unknown thing,
right?
Unknown sudden cardiac arrest, which affects, like you said, 23,000 other children in our country. So what does that look like for a screening? How does a school set up? And then obviously we can get into Leigh High School and the Campbell Unified School District.
Yeah. So, when we first started, we were kind of knocking on doors, literally like, we want to screen your kids. And people, when you say that, they don't really know what that means, right? So we work with the schools. A lot of them, we work with like the athletic directors or the principals to bring this in. We have all the equipment. We own all of our equipment. We bring it all in. We set it up in like a gymnasium area. And we just have different stations the kids go through. They do an EKG, a 12-lead EKG, where it's like 10 leads that get put on them. And like I said, we have the medical volunteers that come. They learn hands-only CPR at our screenings. It's, a non-invasive. It doesn't hurt them. That's one of the things that we always make sure we try to tell the kids, right? That this isn't going to hurt you, because I would say probably 80 to 90% of the kids that we screen, this is the first time they've ever had this test in their life, right? So they're a little freaked out, they're a little scared, and so we try to tell them, you won't feel anything, you won't even know the test is even happening. And then we usually have a doctor on site. We're lucky to have some cardiologists and other doctors in the community that volunteer their time to help us at these events. They'll read the EKG right there on site for them, and if a parent's there, they'll give them the results. So usually when they leave our screening, they'll know at that moment if that EKG was normal or if there was something that they need to follow up on. We also ask a lot of questions, family history, signs or symptoms. So based on that, the doctor may make a recommendation that the kid needs to follow up with a pediatrician. We also have a lot of kids that have high blood pressure that they weren't aware of, that we identify at these things, and so we have them follow up with that. So they usually leave with the results of our screening. Or we can have it read remotely as well if we don't have doctors. So that's kind of how it works. But
securing volunteers, I mean, that just one, I imagine the individuals that do volunteer have some sort of knowledge. And then I imagine there's those that are just willing to. I mean, I work in lots of community events where people are just willing to show up and help because it has to do with children and community.
Yeah.
But how do you secure?
We've been really lucky in that area. Especially in the early days when we first started this, we would have tons of community volunteers, right? But it's just kind of partnering with local doctors. We work with There's a program up at Stanford where they do volunteer hours. So we get a lot of nurses, like on their off days, will come volunteer. And it kind of snowballs. Once you get them out there and they see what we're doing, they kind of share it with coworkers, and then they bring their coworkers, and it just kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And like I said, we've been really lucky there's a couple doctors, retired cardiologists that have a lot of free time, so they come and help us. But yeah,
fills the cup.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. They're doing something good with all of their life's work, and they're giving back.
Yeah, and I just think we're very lucky in the community that we live in. We've never had not enough volunteers at our events, right? General because we have general volunteers that help with check-in or those types of things, and then we need specific medical volunteers, right, that need to have a very specific training and stuff, and that's taken a little bit of time, but we've really built that up, and it's just kind of word of mouth, and we've gotten a lot of partnerships in the community with nursing programs and medical assisting programs and stuff like that, training programs. So
is there a ramp up period where you have more screenings, like beginning of the school year or before the second term? When does that happen?
Well, right now we're pretty much busy year round, besides like summertime. July pretty much is like the only time that we don't have a screen. Well, actually we have one at the end of July, so I shouldn't say that. But usually in the school year we're pretty busy, and then we'll have a downtime, usually April, May timeframe, June, because school's kind of starting to slow down, and people are already planning summer vacations or spring break or that kind of thing. So we try to stay away from those dates. But from August till like March timeframe, we are pretty busy doing screening. So yeah.
And is it, you mentioned in our conversation that Campbell Unified School District has said this is now a mandated thing. We're going to be harnessing Kyle and the foundation that you've created in his honor to come in and do those screenings. How do you get into more schools? What is the obstacle?
Well, with the Campbell Union High School District, Kyle and his sister Allison attended school there, right? So they knew Kyle's story. We'd also had already done a couple of community screenings within that district, so they saw the results coming out of those, that we were identifying kids in these screenings. And the other big thing was, besides Kyle, that district had lost 6 former students to sudden cardiac arrest. And if anybody knows the size of Campbell Union High School District, it's got 6 high schools, 5 that have interscholastic sports programs. So it's not a large district, right? So they had 6 former students that passed from sudden cardiac arrest. And so with the information, we went to them and said that, there's some other states that are already requiring these screenings. So, this is what you should be doing. This is the results they're finding. And so we brought them the data, and it was, I don't want to say it was an easy sell, but it was like, yeah, we need to do this. And so they were on board fairly quickly. And so we just finished the second school year with them, screening their athletes. And now we are actually going to start screening Los Gatos Saratoga High School students in this fall. So they're now the second school district in the state to require it. So we will be at Los Gatos High School and Saratoga High School in the fall, screening all of their student athletes as well.
How does funding for this take place? I mean, I imagine I know that you, as mentioned, you have a full-time job. You also do these screenings to look out for our youth. There has to be another full-time job in there somewhere to say, hey, we need sponsorship. Because if we're going to make this happen and we're going to look after our youth, that also needs to take place. Yeah.
So we're lucky that we do get a lot of sponsorship. Some smaller grants we've applied for. Fundraising is a big thing for us. A lot of our funding comes through that. And then some of the schools will sponsor the event to help offset the cost. And then like for our district required screenings, there is a small fee that the parents will pay just for that, because it's such a large amount of kids. But it really just covers our supplies.
Right. And then you mentioned you now own these machines. So setting up those, I mean, I know that no medical machine is inexpensive. So being able to have these and then maintain and make sure that they're calibrated, I imagine that's a large portion of it as well.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So one of the things that I also want to talk about is that just the journey through grief. You've showed up every day since. And you're doing this on behalf of Kyle, but just the battle that is associated with being present for all these other families, I just imagine that's incredibly difficult.
It can be, for sure. Yeah, it absolutely can be difficult. And but I think for me, what motivates me to do what we're doing is I never want to see another parent go through this grief, because it's a very unique grief in itself, child loss, right? Not everybody experiences it.
Right.
And for me, and I know many other mothers that I have met on this journey, it changes who you are to like just the core of your being. It changes you. And
you woke up different. Day one.
I tell people that Jennifer's gone the day that Kyle died. I'm a different Jennifer. So, for me, if I can help any parent avoid that grief, that intense, life-altering grief, that's what I'm doing. And it helps me, in a selfish way, talk about Kyle as much as I can. It helps me find some purpose in my grief, really. So
I love how you mentioned that the selfish portion of it, right? It is I don't know if it's the best use of that word, but I know exactly what you mean by it as an individual that's experienced loss.
Yeah.
That ability to talk about my loved ones sometimes feels a little selfish.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
But if we don't actively do it, we also discuss that communities don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to engage you. They don't know how to have a conversation about your son and the new version of you that you never actually wanted to meet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's an incredible version.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And then another topic that I've lived myself is sibling grief. And, Kyle and his sister are still close, I imagine, because she is a participant in this. Like this is actually what she does for a living, is directly associated with the heart.
Yeah.
Can you share about that?
Yeah. So Kyle's sister Allison works for an AED manufacturer company. So she got right out of college, got a job working that. So she's, besides being part of our foundation, she's also doing the work for her full-time job. So we are extremely proud of her, and just love that this is what her passion is now too.
Right.
So, yeah.
Talked about the having a job like that, you can go out and you can get all kinds of skills and learn all things, and she has life experience, which she has a greater understanding for that device.
Yeah.
How prominent are those devices? Because I hear about it more and more about businesses making sure that they have AEDs, schools having them. Is that something that's prominent in all schools and all school districts? And are there enough businesses that have those at this point in time?
I don't know much about the business side, because most of the AEDs that we donate are through schools and sports programs. I will say that in California, schools that provide interscholastic sports are required to have an AED. Unfortunately, a lot of those AEDs are locked in an office, in a nurse's office. And so for anything after school, there's no access to those AEDs. And so we tried to provide like portable AEDs that can be taken to the fields or to away games and stuff like that. So they're not they are getting more prominent, right? There's more awareness in the last couple of years about AEDs and how to use them and why they're needed. But there's still a lot of work, I think, to be done in that area, that there should be a lot more AEDs accessible,
And they've made them bulletproof.
Oh, yeah, totally. You can't hurt anybody with an AED at all.
Right. It won't work.
It won't work. No.
As it relates to that's placed on the chest, the device knows that if it needs to, am I using the right terminology, shock the heart?
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll analyze the heart if there's a rhythm. So you attach the pads to your chest, and if the machine deems that it senses a heart rhythm, it won't shock you. So you can't hurt anybody with an AED. It walks you through the steps of what you need to do. So literally anybody that's never seen an AED work before can work an AED.
Right. It's actually talking.
Yeah, it talks to you through the steps
while you're going through those steps.
Yep.
And that is needed because potentially a child didn't have a screening like this in advance to know that they should be focusing on something different.
Right.
How does one address the electrical and structural side of with a pediatrician? What are steps? And I know, not a physician, but also an expert at the same time.
Yeah.
What are the steps that someone does after they have information?
So, I mean, there's so many different things that can be identified. There's not really like a one kind of answer for that. What we tell everybody, if something is identified, absolutely follow up with your pediatrician or a pediatric cardiologist. Electrical issues, the two most common ones that you hear are Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, or WPW, or long QT syndrome. What they'll do is they'll go in and do an ablation of the electrical path to fix it. Like WPW is an extra electrical path in your heart. So they'll go off and make that so that's not there anymore. And then you can go on and live a normal life. Some structural issues, there's, some medications that may be able to be taken, maybe monitoring of the child, but everything we tell everybody, no matter what it is, you need to follow up after this with your doctor. So. But
it doesn't sound, if you have this information and you're going to take action, it doesn't sound like the action that needs to be taken is it minimally invasive? Are those?
Yeah. I mean, those ablation surgeries, I believe it's either an outpatient or 1 day in the hospital kind of thing. So they can be pretty non-invasive. Obviously if somebody has like a valve issue, you have to actually go in and replace the valve. That can be obviously a little bit more invasive. But for the most part, the misconception is, if you identify my kid with a heart-related issue, they're never going to play a sport again. That's not always the case, So it just kind of depends on what's identified.
More often than not, it's been identified so that your child can continue to play sports safely,
right?
Or just be an individual in our universe, in our community,
right? Yeah,
without having to have the impact of sudden cardiac arrest.
Exactly. Yeah, and we've identified kids that maybe have a heart-related issue, but it doesn't put them at risk for cardiac arrest. We've had kids that their heart's tilted a little bit in their chest, so when it shows up on an EKG, it looks different, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't put them at any kind of risk of anything, but at least they know that information now. When they leave, when they go forward in their lives, and the doctor goes, "Oh, there's something not right on your EKG," they can say, "Oh yeah, I have." There's a name for it, and I can't recall the name, but or knowing, they have high blood pressure or all those other things. We're just providing you additional information so you're aware going forward in your life that you may have some issues. So
it's wild that this muscle that is critical for our life is so underdiagnosed in our children.
Yeah. And I think before this happened to Kyle, I assumed, gosh, it's your heart, right? It's the engine of your body, right? I mean, that goes out, that the body stops. So you assume that that's so known about, medically, and you find out that it's in fact not, and that there's not as much testing done that we feel that should be done. But yeah.
We also discussed heart attack, which it is, when you read it in the news, right?
Yeah.
We joked about this when I see things that are associated with funeral. That it's ever in pop culture or in the news, I read it through a different lens. You read everything that's associated with a child and their heart through a different lens. And you mentioned that many times it'll say this child had a heart attack, and they're that's completely different.
Yeah. So I think people just use that as an overarching just description of it. But a heart attack and a cardiac arrest are different. So a heart attack is usually somebody usually over the age of 35 and older. Usually it's a blockage in your arteries. A lot of people take, cholesterol meds or stuff like that to reduce that. Or somebody can say, I think I'm having a heart attack. They get the tightness of their chest, you get the left arm numbness and all those other things. Sudden cardiac arrest is just that. It's sudden. Your heart just suddenly stops. So it's different. It's, like I said, it's usually a structural or electrical issue. A heart attack can cause you to go into cardiac arrest, but it's two different things. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
And one of the things that I want to talk about when we get back is how you can help resuscitate someone in that situation, and the work that you do in the community as it relates to educating individuals and children on those aspects, when there's not an AED, when someone hasn't been diagnosed, so that other individuals know that there's classes and information that can be taken. I want to thank all of our listeners for watching Guiding Grief. We are here with Jennifer Sarmento, and we are learning about the Kyle J. Taylor Foundation and sudden cardiac arrest. Thank you for watching. We'll have a brief introduction from our sponsors. Thanks so much. I'd like to take an opportunity and pause just to thank our sponsors, Darling Fisher and Los Gatos Memorial Park, celebrating lives one story at a time. As members of the community here in Campbell, San Jose, and Los Gatos, it has been an honor to care for so many of the loved ones of our community, and we are so grateful for your trust. That's why we're supporting this podcast, Guiding Grief, and bringing your community information about how to heal. Welcome back to Guiding Grief. We are sitting here with Jennifer Sarmento from the KJT Foundation, and we're going to continue talking about how to triage and help a child if you're at a sporting event or if you're out in the world, and CPR, which is also something we've discussed. And are there classes that you promote or certifications that are available?
Yeah. So we through our foundation, we can do certification through the American Red Cross. So my husband and myself are both instructors, CPR instructors through that. So we can do a certification course that we also do demos and quick little trainings at our screenings. So, and that one we just teach like hands-only CPR. So to identify it, if you're out somewhere and you see somebody collapse, there's kind of just a couple steps that you have to take. First, make sure that they are, shake them and see if they're okay. Are you okay? Maybe somebody, fainted because, some other reason, but they're still breathing. Check their breathing to see if they are breathing normally. So one of the misconceptions is about cardiac arrest is sometimes somebody can still seem like they're breathing, but it's more of like a gasp. And so people mistake it that it's not cardiac arrest, and so they'll think it's something else and they won't go into it. So make sure that they're breathing normally, and then ask somebody to call 911, grab an AED if there's one nearby, and then you start CPR compressions. So you usually do 100 to 120 beats per minute, and you push about 2 minutes into the middle of the chest, and just keep doing compressions until somebody arrives, either an EMT arrives, and then or an AED arrives, and you can put it. So quick way to remember it. We all kind of grew up with duck and cover for earthquakes and that kind of thing. So there's one for this. It's called call push shock. So you call 911, you push for compressions, and you shock with an AED. Call push shock. So we try to teach that to kids and tell them kind of what sudden cardiac arrest looks like. Sometimes it may look like somebody's going into a seizure. So it looks a little different than what you may imagine in your head what it looks like. So we try to also help with that to identify when it's happening. How frequently are those trainings, and is it coupled with the screenings that there's also time to do that education? Yeah. So like our certifications, we do. We can we don't have like standing classes, but we can set up a class if somebody's interested in doing a class. We do a lot of certifications with the school districts, again with their coaches, all their athletic coaches. We do a lot of their certifications that are required. We'll also do classes for the community as well, and then our screenings, we just do a quick demonstration. So it's not a certification, but they just get a quick training. So people don't have to be certified to do CPR on somebody. As long as you know the basics of what to do, right, you could jump in and help them. Yeah. When it comes to fundraising, there is your golf tournament, and you mentioned that's the 7th annual. Can you talk about where that is? Sure. And about the event and how to get involved? Sure. So yeah, we have our biggest fundraiser of the year is our golf tournament. So this is our 7th annual golf tournament, and it's kind of a special one. Kyle, soccer jersey most of the time was 7. So 7's kind of played an important role in a lot of the things we do. So the 7th annual is kind of a big one for us. It's going to be this year at Coyote Creek Golf Course in Morgan Hill on July 15th, Monday, July 15th. If somebody would like to get involved, you can go to our website, kylejtaylor.org, to sign up to golf. We are closing registration June 30th, so there's only about 10 days left to get involved. And if you don't want to golf but want to come, we do offer a dinner-only option where you can come to the dinner banquet after the golf round. But this really is our biggest fundraiser event of the year for us, and it helps us really fund so much that we do throughout the year. So or somebody wants to volunteer too. We're also looking for volunteers to come out to that event as well. Always need volunteers. Always need people. Yeah, to put all these events on. Right. Exactly. To know you is to be inspired. To know that there was
a great impact on your life. And then knowing that there was a call to action. There's so many people, unfortunately, that have lost children. And on day one, I know that so many have said, I need to do something. You're the one. Right? And I know that there's other moms and families out there that have set out based on what impacted their life to say, hey, I'm going to do this. But you're an individual in our community that has, in your son's name, said, I'm going to help your kid. I'm going to make sure that you never experience what I've experienced. And I just think it's one of the most noble things. My mom and I talked the other night when I was letting her know that I had the chance to speak with you and have you on Guiding Grief, and just brought to tears knowing that she's also lost a child,
Right.
and the work that we've done as it relates to bladder cancer and supporting that organization. So thank you on behalf of our entire community for the continued outreach for supporting children and avoiding sudden cardiac arrest. As I mentioned, we are sitting here with Jennifer Sarmento. She is a member of our community. She is the mother of Kyle J. Taylor, who was an incredible part of our community. And Kyle is doing amazing work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a guest on Guiding Grief. Thank you to everyone that tunes in to Guiding Grief. We are grateful for your support. And if there's an opportunity for you to talk to someone as it relates to their loved one, don't hesitate. Always ask the question, could you tell me about Kyle? Could you tell me about Nate? And allow them the opportunity, allow the bereaved to give life to their loved one. It is not something that you should shy away from. It is something you should lean into. Thanks again for being a part of Guiding Grief, and thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Guiding Grief podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach. Grief is a profound experience, but you're not alone. Let's continue to navigate this journey together. If you have any thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore, reach out. Until next time, be kind to yourself, find strength in your resilience, and always hold on to hope. Before we end, I'd like to give a quick thank you to KJT TV for producing our show. Please remember, be good to one another.